Hello everyone, I hope you're well today. My name is Makeda Valletta, also known as The Body Scientist. I'm live on my IG page right now and I will save it and repost it to my YouTube. But in case you're unfamiliar with me, I have a background in exercise and sports science and nutrition science with a specialty in sports nutrition and strength and conditioning, and my approach to fitness and to nutrition is holistic, okay? So, meaning that I stick as close to nature and indigenous practices as possible. And I always say that I've dedicated my life to studying all the ways that we can take our body to its highest level, okay? And so that actually starts in the womb, all right? Now, once we're here, we can't do anything about what our mother didn't do or what our parents didn't do prior to our conception and us being born in the womb and how we were raised. So as adults, there are things that we can do to try to counteract that, but nutrition during our developmental years is super important. I'm also a doula, birth worker, and so I'm very much into researching and understanding, why people have certain health problems that they have, okay? And, our health has a lot to do with what our parents consumed before they even had us, okay? And what our grandparents ate as well. And this is why you can see some people nowadays who don't eat the best diet, but they still have a good body structure and good health because they may have been given a lot of nutrients, from their parents and their grandparents, all right? So with that being said, I want to have a conversation about vitamin A, the importance of vitamin A and vitamin D in pregnancy. I have other YouTube videos where I've spoken about vitamin A and vitamin D. You should definitely check those out. I will post them below on this YouTube video when I post it on my YouTube. So I definitely highly suggest you check those videos out as well, because I'll get very in-depth into vitamin A and vitamin D science. But this video in particular, I want to speak about vitamin A and vitamin D and the importance that it plays in pregnancy, okay? So vitamin A is really important for cell differentiation, okay? So when our cells are making different organs, our brain, our lungs, our heart, our genitals, vitamin A is what is responsible for giving those instructions, okay? So vitamin A is what is responsible for giving the genetic instructions. And so when people are deficient in vitamin A at the time of conception and during pregnancy, it can cause a lot of defects with internal organs. So when babies are born or people are born with heart defects and genital defects, this doesn't just happen out of nowhere. It's not like, oh, it's just the luck of the draw, that it's just bad luck. It has everything to do with nutrition, okay? So vitamin A is critical in telling, the cells and the organs what to do so they can form the proper body parts. And nowadays, from the stats I've been reading, you're seeing more and more congenital defects with internal organs, okay? And a lot of that has to do with, the advice that's given a lot of times to pregnant women about nutrition and the artificial forms of vitamins that you find in a lot of prenatals. And most women are unaware of these things and nobody's really telling them this, but it's critical. And this is the reason why I believe so much in traditional foods, okay? People have been on this planet for thousands of years, have been having babies for thousands of hundreds of thousands of years and having several of them. And when people say that, we're healthy, we're living longer now than we ever have, that's totally not true. We have more health problems now than we've ever had. Everything is an epidemic that's becoming the norm. Okay? Vitamin A also plays a role in eyesight. So even me wearing glasses, that's not normal. Like, people should be able to see very good. Think about indigenous people who had to hunt for food, You know, I always joke that I couldn't have been a runaway slave on the Underground Railroad because I can't see. You know, like I need my glasses, right? And so now so many people wear glasses, and so many people wear contacts that it becomes the norm. But really good eyesight, okay, that is really what it's supposed to be, okay? So with that being said, studies have shown that 1/3 of women do not consume enough vitamin A in general, but especially, you know, during pregnancy. There's an organization, you know what, I meant to bring some books over here. Darn it, I'm not going to get up now. I meant to bring some books over here to show you that I feel like you should look at some references. But instead I'll just write them below in the notes. And some of them are posted on my Instagram page as well. So I forgot to bring them over here. But one organization who I highly respect when it comes to nutrition in general, but especially prenatal nutrition, is the Weston A. Price Foundation. They do independent research that is independently funded. A lot of research, a lot of research about nutrition is tainted because it's funded by a lot of big corporations, okay? And they have invested interest in telling you nonsense so they can sell you their processed products, okay? So as somebody who has a background in the biochemistry of nutrition and have spent years reading and dissecting studies, not just listening to what the articles say, where, you know, actually looking at the studies and really researching this, I can tell you that a lot of it is flawed. The Weston A. Price Foundation, which I highly suggest that you check out, you can check it out, their website, Weston A. Price Foundation. They have an Instagram page, but they do a lot of independent research around nutrition, and the information is critical. But the Weston A. Price Foundation recommends that pregnant women consume, and not even just pregnant women, like even when you're not pregnant, okay, cod liver oil. Cod liver oil, which is something that I feel like no matter where you're from in the world, you were given cod liver oil as a kid, if you're of a certain age. I feel like a lot of people are not giving cod liver oil to their kids anymore, but everybody I know, and if you were given cod liver oil as a kid, please feel free to share that. I feel like whether you're Asian, Jamaican, American, European, you were given cod liver oil. So the Weston A. Price Foundation recommends that a dose of cod liver oil every day to get 20,000 IUs of vitamin A and 2,000 IUs of vitamin D and 2 grams of omega-3s. So the vitamin D and vitamin A work together. For every unit of vitamin D, you need a unit of vitamin A. A lot of people have been speaking about vitamin D, especially since COVID, and a lot of people take vitamin D pills. But you don't want to take any vitamin by itself in isolation, because vitamins work with other vitamins. They have other cofactors. They don't work alone. It's like taking when people take pharmaceutical drugs. When people take pharmaceutical drugs, what they do is they isolate the active compounds out of the herb, right? But whatever the active compound is in the herb is supposed to be with every other thing that's in that plant in order to be balanced and work correctly. When they isolate the active compounds and give it to you individually, that's when it causes a bunch of side effects and problems, right? So the same thing is true with nutrition. Vitamins on their own are like a drug, and they cause side effects because they need other things in the food to balance it. This is the reason why I believe in getting your nutrients from food and whole food supplements. Cod liver oil is basically a food, okay? So the vitamin D and the vitamin A are balanced, in a good balance. And then vitamin D and vitamin A are fat-soluble vitamins, okay? The fat-soluble vitamins, vitamins K, E, D, and A, which is the second half of my name, they need fat to be absorbed, okay? And omega-3 fats is really important during pregnancy and when you're not pregnant, because it's really important for your brain, and it's a very potent anti-inflammatory. So for the woman's pregnant, about a teaspoon, about two teaspoons, or one, not a quarter. What is it? About 1 3/4 of a teaspoon is good to get enough of that. Okay. Vitamin A is especially important for the development of the communication systems between the sense organs and the brain. So the brain being able to communicate with the sensory organs, vitamin A plays a very important role with that. Even, and I'm looking at my notes so I can remember to say everything. Even with a mild vitamin A deficiency, it can compromise the number of nephrons in your kidneys, okay? And when that happens, that person is set up for kidney disease later on in life. So sometimes certain health problems that people have later on in life has to do with the conditions in the womb and certain nutritional deficiencies in the womb. So if the mother has a vitamin A deficiency, even a mild one, it causes there to be a lack of nephrons in the kidneys, which then can set that person up for kidney disease later in life. Just like gestational diabetes, you know, a lot of people think that gestational diabetes is minor, like, oh, I have diabetes, I'm just going to manage it. But there's much research to show that when women have gestational diabetes, a lot of times it sets that kid up to have diabetes later in life. So now we're seeing like this increase of diabetes in kids. That didn't just come from what they ate since they've been born. That's coming from the conditions in the womb, okay? Babies who are born to mothers with gestational diabetes have a higher incidence of a lot of illnesses, and diabetes is one of them. Obesity as well. Vitamin A is super necessary during fetal development, but also throughout adult life. Like I said, it's not just, you know, where babies, like vitamin A is super important. It helps to maintain the cells, the presence of the cells that line our lungs. The cilia cells that help to, the cilia is like hair-like projections that helps to eliminate toxins, okay? So when we have, we're exposed to certain toxins, excuse me, when we're exposed to certain toxins and our body's trying to eliminate it, vitamin A plays a critical role in the presence of those cells, okay? The cilia, they just sweep away like debris and stuff like that that we're being exposed to that's coming into our lungs, pollutants, infectious disease. This is the reason why, like, you know, I made a video about vitamin A and our immune system last March of 2020, it's 2021. In 2020, when COVID first started, I did a video about vitamin A and the immune system, talking about that. Vitamin A plays a critical role in our immune system, as does vitamin D, okay? And again, they work together. During and after the formation of our bodily systems, vitamin A also plays a critical role in maintaining them, okay? And maintaining them, and it plays a role in its continued growth, all right? The RDA, so I always talk about the RDA is the recommended dietary allowance. That's how much the ADA, which is the American Dietetic Association, says that we're supposed to eat of this nutrient every day. Now the RDAs for every nutrient is lower than it should be, because again, the RDAs is based off of very bad research, okay? Weston A. Price, so talking about the Weston A. Price Foundation, Weston A. Price was an American dentist who, I think in the 1930s, he went around the world to remote places in Africa, in South America, in the Polynesian Islands, in Europe, in Asia, and he examined the foods that people, their indigenous foods, the foods that they were eating before they started eating the white man's foods, and he was a white man. And when I'm talking about the white man's foods, it was the sugar, flour, and seed oils. I'm not going to say vegetable oils, because what they call vegetable oils don't come from vegetables. There actually are no vegetable oils. There are seed oils and there are fruit oils. Like coconut oil is a fruit, right? So it's actually a fruit oil. But the seed oils like soybean oil, corn oil, canola oil, safflower oil, sunflower oil, those all come from seeds, okay? Those oils are highly inflammatory. That's not what people were eating before there were roads and they were being shipped in these processed foods. So he examined what they look like just one generation after eating the white man's foods, after eating these processed foods. He examined their teeth, their dental structure. He took photos of them, and he took their traditional foods that they were eating. Some people that he went to visit were still eating their traditional foods, and he saw the difference between the facial structure, their dental health, than the people who are eating, the white man's foods, right? So the people who are eating their traditional foods, he took those foods to the laboratory to see how much vitamin A, how much vitamin D, how much vitamin E, vitamin K, and iodine and choline is in these foods. And what he found was that indigenous people, and this is including Europeans, like everybody everywhere who was eating their traditional foods, they're eating tons more vitamin A and vitamin D and vitamin E and vitamin K than Americans were at that time, the ones who were eating processed foods, because not all Americans were. He was white, but there were a lot of, black people in the South who might have still been eating their traditional foods. But he was just comparing people who are eating their traditional foods, no matter where they lived in the world, and people eating processed foods, and the difference in the nutrient content. He looked at their bones. He did very thorough research. So this book is called Nutrition and Physical Degeneration, okay, by Weston A. Price. I think it is the most important research there's ever been done about nutrition, indigenous nutrition. We don't need to guess what we need to be doing when we can look back at populations, healthy, long-living populations, and see what they were doing and what they were eating, okay? We don't need to reinvent the wheel. So the RDA, which is the Recommended Dietary Allowance, which comes from the American Dietetic Association. I remember when I was in graduate school learning that the way they came up with these numbers was by taking sick people in the hospital who were on their deathbed, right, and looking at how much of these nutrients were needed to keep them alive. The bare minimum, just to keep them alive, not to keep them healthy and vibrant in their optimal state. Then the nutrition advice, the recommendations that were given to pregnant women wasn't based on any research. It was like, okay, if this is what people need, okay, just to maintain the bare minimum of health, okay, so now if she's pregnant, they just added a few more. Like this was not based on any real research, right? So the recommended dietary allowance for humans who are not pregnant and pregnant is way lower than it should be. So with that being said, the RDA for pregnant women is 2,600 IUs, okay? Which is just 3,000 IUs higher than the recommended daily allowance for non-pregnant women, right? So they just put an extra 300 on there. If you are pregnant, it's just 300 more, okay? Now, so the RDA says 2,600. The Weston A. Price Foundation says that it should be 20,000, okay? So it's almost 10 times greater. Indigenous people were almost eating 10 times the amount of vitamin A that pregnant women are currently told that they need, okay? This is criminal. So, cod liver oil is like one of the best sources. It has the perfect balance of vitamin A and D. It's very potent. But on top of that, okay, you can also get vitamin A from raw milk, from grass-fed butter, from pasture-raised eggs. Now, when I talk about milk, butter, eggs, I'm never talking about it from the commercial food industry, okay? Same thing with produce. The food from the commercial food industry is bad news, okay? And I have videos where I get more in depth with that. But when you're getting food from the farm, whether it be plant or animals, okay? When you're getting your produce from local farms that's grown in good soil, that's picked at the right time, that's grown without a bunch of pesticides and GMO, it's going to be much more potent in nutrients. Same thing is true with the animal foods. When you're consuming milk from grass-fed cows that is raw and not pasteurized and homogenized, and coming from sick cows that have antibiotics and hormones and are eating a toxic diet, because cows should only be eating grass. When you have milk from the commercial food industry, totally different substance, okay? Raw milk is very high in probiotics, which is critical for your immune system, for digestion. It's high in the lipase enzyme, the amylase enzyme, and the lactase enzyme, okay, which help you to digest everything that's in the milk and assimilate. Eggs, I have a whole video where I talk about eggs. It's like 45 minutes. Eggs are a superfood for the brain, particularly the yolk. It's very high in B vitamins, high in choline. Choline is very important and needed in great quantities when a woman is pregnant. And there's many studies that show that babies who are born to mothers who had a lot of choline tend to do a lot better on intelligence tests and IQ tests and stuff like that. I will do a video about choline later, because there are other sources of choline, and I think seafood, if I can remember correctly, is also an excellent source of choline. And actually, seafood is a good source of vitamin A and D as well. So we have the cod liver oil, also liver, which is a traditional food that everybody in the world ate. So I talked about cod liver oil, but I also feel like if you're a certain age, you were given liver when you were a kid, even if you hated it, because I hate liver. But liver is like one of the most nutrient-rich foods you can consume, especially when it comes to vitamin D, but also zinc, B vitamins, iron, vitamin C, okay? Liver has about 100 times more vitamin C than any fruit or vegetable. So liver is super important. So cod liver oil and liver are the most potent. Then we have, grass-fed raw milk. We have pasture eggs, particularly the yolks, grass-fed butter, and ghee, okay? Ghee is an excellent fat to cook with. Butter is also an excellent fat. I have a whole video just about butter, where I get more in depth about that. Also pork fat, okay? So pork fat is also an excellent source of vitamins A and D. And pork fat is a traditional fat that many people in the world cook with lard. Pork is demonized mostly because of religion and propaganda. But the only people in the world that don't eat pork are Muslim people. Now, when you're eating pork, there's tons of pork eating in the American South, and of course in Mexico, in Jamaica, in Cuba. Like, you can't eat in Cuba if you don't eat pork. In Puerto Rico, in Haiti, the Asians love pork. You go to a Japanese ramen restaurant, all they use is pork broth. The Okinawa, who are the longest living, healthiest people in the world, they cook with lard every day. Lard is actually a healthy fat, and they cook with lard every day. You go to Europe, like when I was in Spain, like you couldn't escape pork. Italy, France, the Polynesian islands, everybody eats a lot of pork, okay? But pork fat is super potent in vitamins A and D. And again, I'm talking about pasture pork, which is coming from healthy pigs that are coming from the farm, not from the commercial food industry. Let me make that clear, okay? Studies have shown that a lot of artificial vitamin A in pregnancy causes birth defects. So when people are taking, a lot of vitamin A from supplements, it's like not a good chemical form. It's not the same chemical form you find in nature. That has been linked to birth defects and vitamin A toxicity. So some people think, I shouldn't eat a lot of vitamin A in pregnancy because it's linked to birth defects. But like I told you, there's a lot of bad research in nutrition that's funded by Big Pharma, and which is also the food companies are the same as Big Pharma. They're the same people. And so they put up this propaganda that, vitamin A causes birth defects. But when you look at the research and the studies, it shows that those studies that said that, they were using artificial vitamin A. That was not the same chemical form that you find in nature. And if you consume a lot of that, it will cause birth defects. It can cause birth defects, okay? And it's a synthetic vitamin A. So some of the birth defects that can occur from consuming too much of a synthetic vitamin A is kidney malformation, dysfunctional uterus, which are like the uterus is like the tube that the urine comes out of. It makes it dysfunctional where it like pushes the urine back up inside of you, or like does weird things. Also cleft palate, eye defects, causing the brain to be located outside the skull, okay, which is a serious defect. Also an overbite or an underbite, and dental arch problems, okay? It can all be linked to vitamin A deficiency, which can happen from taking, from not consuming enough vitamin A or consuming too much of the synthetic vitamin A, okay? Also, it's, some people will say you can get vitamin A from plants. That's not true. I talk about this more in depth in my vitamin A science video on my page. What you can get from plants is beta carotene, okay? Beta carotene is a precursor of vitamin A, which means that it can be converted into vitamin A. But in order for that to happen, you need a lot of saturated fat, and it's not an efficient process in babies, the elderly, and people with metabolic problems, okay? They're not able to do that. And you need about 8 units of beta carotene to make 1 true unit of vitamin A. True vitamin A is called retinol. That sounds like retina. Oh yeah, another good source of vitamin A is the eyeballs of animals. Okay, I remember in my nutritional biochemistry class, you learn about where nutrients are stored in the body. Vitamin A is stored in the eyes. We all hear that vitamin A is good for our eyes. All my friends from Haiti and Jamaica that grew up eating fish head soup and they ate the eyes, they have perfect eyesight. They don't wear glasses or anything. There are stories of Native Americans coming across Europeans going blind in the woods, and they gave them deer eyeballs to eat, okay? So organ meats was something that every culture consumed organ meats. Most of the nutrition is in the organs, not the flesh, okay? And so, but it has been shown too that the more beta carotene you consume, the less vitamin A, the less that it converts to true vitamin A, okay? So that's weird. So basically, trying to get your vitamin A from beta carotene is not very efficient. The beta carotene is what's in carrots and mangoes and even I think spinach. So, but if you want to try to, uptake it more and try to convert it, you need saturated fats. So that's why you see people eat like yams with butter, and they cook their spinach in butter, or you have berries and cream, strawberries and cream, peaches and cream, bananas and cream. That cream and that fat, that saturated fat, helps you to absorb the beta carotene and convert it into vitamin A even, or just even absorb it, because beta carotene has properties of its own. They're fat-soluble vitamins. Remember, the vitamins K, E, D, and A are fat-soluble, so that means they need fat in order to be absorbed, all right? Now, when it comes to vitamin D, I think over the past year, we've been hearing a lot about vitamin D deficiencies. I've been talking about vitamin D and the importance of vitamin D for years, okay? And every health problem that Black people, indigenous people, when I say that, Native people to the Americas or whatever, suffer from is linked to vitamin D deficiencies, okay? So what are those things? Asthma, diabetes, hypertension, preterm labor, cancer, okay? They're all linked to vitamin D deficiencies. You can go on YouTube and put it in, diabetes and vitamin D deficiency, hypertension and vitamin D deficiency, preterm labor and vitamin D deficiency. And you will find tons of scientists who, upper respiratory tract infections and vitamin D deficiencies. You will find tons of scientists giving detailed lectures about this. You can also Google it, okay? But also anemia. Like a lot of people, associate anemia with just being associated with iron, but that's not just associated with iron. Anemia is a complex issue where iron plays a role, but it's also some B vitamins and vitamin D for sure. So a woman who's deficient in vitamin D in pregnancy, some of the symptoms are anemia, a primary C-section, gestational diabetes, bacterial vaginosis, okay, because vitamin D does play an important role in modulating our immune system. Influenza-like illness during pregnancy is also linked to vitamin D deficiency. Preeclampsia, sepsis, tooth loss, and low birth weight babies are all linked to vitamin D deficiencies in pregnancy, okay? And it's interesting because when you look at studies of, Black kids, like let's say that your vitamin D levels should be at 50, right? When they do the vitamin D of like Black kids, their levels be like at 5 and 10. And then you wonder why there's so many Black kids with asthma. Or why so many Black people were having a hard time with COVID. Now I'm not going to get too much into the COVID thing because I have a lot to say with that, but I'm just saying vitamin D helps to modulate our immune system and is very much linked to upper respiratory tract infections. The people who are getting upper respiratory tract infections and colds and stuff, very much linked to vitamin D deficiency. So when a woman is pregnant, she has an increased need for everything, every nutrient, right? And so having certain health problems, in pregnancy is linked to certain deficiencies in nutrients. So this is the reason why it's so important to eat nutrient-dense foods. Also, humans women who have high vitamin D, they're less likely to pass on the HIV virus to their kids if they do have the HIV virus. So if you have a woman who has the HIV virus, many studies have shown that having high levels of vitamin D prevents her from passing that on, okay? Because again, vitamin D plays a critical role in modulating our immune system. And I talk about that more in my vitamin D videos. I'm not going to get super into that science right now because this is really about vitamin D in pregnancy. In the late third trimester of pregnancy, the fetal skeleton enters a period of rapid growth, and that requires a lot of calcium, a lot of phosphorus, a lot of vitamin D. And raw grass-fed dairy is an excellent source of all those things, okay? And if not grass-fed dairy, then bones, okay? So people who consume sardines, okay, like I don't like sardines, so I do the dairy, but when people are eating sardines, they're eating the little fish bones, okay? Even bone broth is debatable. Some people say that there's a lot of calcium in bone broth, but from my research, some people say there is, some people say there isn't. And from my research, it depends on how that broth is made, because people make bone broth for different time periods. Some people make a long simmered bone broth and it's a short simmered, so it might have to do with how the bone broth is made, but definitely consuming bones. And again, if you're of a certain age, you definitely saw older people in your family eating bones, biting it open, eating the marrow. Like, there's nutrition in the bones, okay? And an infant that's born 6 weeks premature has only laid down about half of the calcium in the bones. So, like, you know, if a baby is born about 6 weeks premature, they're actually deficient in a lot of calcium, which is interesting because I was born 7 weeks early. I was supposed to be born like September 17th, and I was born August 1st. And granted, you know, I have a twin, and so a lot of times with twins, they come early, but that's not always the case. And so for all I could know, my mother could have been deficient in vitamin A and vitamin D, you know. So, like I said, we can't do anything about what, you know, our conditions were then or when we were growing up, but we can do our very best to eat nutrient-rich foods now to try to have the best outcome, okay? But when you have the knowledge and you understand that, you know, starting in the womb, and then when babies and kids are in the developmental stages, because once you're developed, there's no going back to fix that. So if you don't have the right nutrients when you're developing, a lot of times you may not reach your full genetic potential. So when it comes to DNA, nutrients turn genes on and off, okay? They can turn genes on, they can turn them off, they can mutate them. Toxins can mutate them to code for something else. It's called nutrigenomics, it's a whole field, but nutrition definitely interacts with our genes. So this is the reason why how we come out is a product of nature and nurture, okay? It's not just, when people say, oh, it's genetic and da-da-da-da, like your genes can be altered depending on the environment. So how we end up, you know, has to do with nature, okay? What we've been given from nature, genetically, from our parents, and nurture, what our environment, the conditions was like, okay? And a number of things. What nutrients did we have or not have? What toxins were we exposed to? The environment, nature and nurture, right? Vitamin D also plays a critical role in lung development. And at birth, an infant's vitamin D level is almost identical to the vitamin D level of the mother, okay? So if the mother is super deficient in vitamin D, so will the baby, okay? Like, they almost are identical. Adequate levels of vitamin D protect the newborn from tetany, convulsions, and heart failure as well. Now again, you know, like I said, we are given nutrients from our parents and our grandparents. So sometimes you have people now who may not eat the best foods, but because our parents did, because our parents might have grown up on a farm eating foods from the farm, and maybe our grandparents did too, we are given those nutrient stores. So some people have a little bit more wiggle room, you know, they maybe not taking care of themselves the best, they're not eating the most nutrient-dense foods, but their parents and their grandparents did. So they could still have a baby that comes out pretty much okay. You have other people who are already super depleted because their parents didn't eat a good diet, their grandparents didn't eat a good diet, and now they're super depleted and they give birth to a sickly baby. So all that plays a role. And that's why now, if you look at stats and articles, they're saying that the kids now are expected to live a shorter life than their parents. And this is the first time in history that they're saying that there's a generation of kids who are expected to live shorter life than their parents because they're so unhealthy. Okay? One study in Britain showed that 36% of new mothers and 32% of newborn infants had no detectable vitamin D in their blood at all. Okay? None. Now we know how cloudy it is in Britain. Like, right now I'm in Chicago and I'm like feeling like I'm going to lose my mind because it's been so cloudy and rainy and cool. And I left New York a couple days ago where it was sunny and hot. It's so annoying. But the sun is important, okay? Yes, we get vitamin D from the sun. Well, the sun hits our skin and causes some biochemical reactions to happen that can produce vitamin D. But I talk about this more in depth in my my vitamin D videos, that in order to get enough vitamin D from the sun, you have to be out. Like, the darker your skin is, the more sunlight you need to get enough vitamin D. Okay? So someone who's very fair skinned, maybe they could be outside for 30 minutes and it's enough. But if the more melanin you have, the more sun you need to get vitamin D. And you have to expose as much of your skin as possible to the sun. So if you have on pants and a long sleeve shirt, that's not, which when I go to the Caribbean, when I've been in Cuba, when I've been in Haiti, when I've been in Colombia, in Cartagena, Cali, which is hot as hell, okay, even when I was in the Yucatan Peninsula in Mexico, where it was hot as hell. The people that live there, they walk around with long sleeve shirts and pants all day long. I don't get it. But if you're doing that, and I've never been to Africa, but I heard they do the same thing in Africa. They walk around with hoodies and pants, and it's like hot as hell. So if you're doing that, you're definitely going to have a vitamin D deficiency. So if you think about it, before we were colonized, everybody who came from a hot place, whether it be Africa, the Americas, Southeast Asia, the Polynesian Islands, they were naked before they were colonized. We need as much of our skin as possible exposed to the sun, which is why in the summertime or when it's hot out, I'm outside as naked as possible. It's not because I'm trying to be cute. I'm trying to get my sun on, and which is good for my health, okay? And I get more in depth into vitamin D science in my vitamin D videos, so I'm not going to go super in depth with that. And you can check out my other videos on that. But there's, when blood is drawn of melanated people who live in the north or live in, the UK, they're super deficient in vitamin D. It's almost like universal, okay? Another study showed that 60% of infants born to white mothers in the spring and the summer had levels under 8 nanograms per liter. That's horribly deficient, okay? Like, if people, like, let's say 50 nanograms of vitamin D per liter is, like, let's say you should be no less than 50, right? So being at 8, that's super low. That's what I was saying. A lot of black kids who live in the north, their vitamin D levels aren't that low, and they have asthma and all these problems. So that study said that 60% of infants born to white mothers, okay, because vitamin D deficiency is the problem around the world, even amongst white people, but it's worse with melanated people. So 60% of infants born to white mothers in the spring and summer had levels under 8 nanograms. So imagine for melanated people, okay? It's very important to, and then when you're living in the northern hemisphere, you can only get vitamin D from the sun in the summertime. Most of the year, you cannot get vitamin D from the sun, so you're going to have to get it from food. Studies indicate that the prevalence of vitamin D deficiencies in pregnant women worldwide ranges between 20 to 85%, with rates of deficiency reaching 98% in some areas. Okay? So like I said, vitamin D deficiencies, and vitamin A too, is a worldwide problem, which is also why COVID can so easily spread around the world and make people sick. But it's also one of the things that protects you. Okay? I have been going back and forth between New York and Chicago since, I remember last March and April. Everybody was scared of New York because all you saw in the news, everybody in New York is dying of COVID. Okay? My parents were in the zip code in Manhattan where it was the highest. And I said, I'm going to go to New York to make sure that my family is good. So if anybody gets sick, I'm going to take care of them. Ain't nobody going to the hospital, because I swear the hospital was killing people. Okay, let's be real. I'm not going to get so much into the politics right now, but there are nurses and doctors who talk about that, all right, who have spoken up about this. They were not treating people, and they were throwing them on ventilators and stuff. we don't hear about people dying from COVID now, even though they're trying to scare us to death. It was a Delta thing, whatever, but we don't hear about COVID deaths now. Last year, this time, every day in the news, 500 people died of COVID. This many people died of COVID, and it was the hospital. But regardless of that, I'm not saying COVID's not real. I'm saying that most people survive it, and that if you really wanted to strengthen your immune system against it, vitamin D and vitamin A is critical, along with probiotics and zinc and some other things. But there's so much research on how vitamin D modulates the immune system, the role that vitamin A plays in the immune system. Like I said, I've done videos on this. And it's a worldwide problem. So again, studies indicate that the prevalence of vitamin D deficiencies in pregnant women worldwide range between 20 to 85%, with rates of deficiency reaching 98% in some areas. If you have darker skin, this is what I've been saying, you are at a 6-fold higher risk of deficiency. 6-fold. If you have darker skin, you're at a 6-fold higher risk of deficiency. Now, some vitamin D mechanisms. Vitamin D is responsible for calcium absorption and metabolism. So vitamin D and calcium work together. And what's an excellent source of vitamin D and calcium? Dairy. Okay. Of course, raw grass-fed dairy, if it's the yogurt, if it's raw milk, if it's sour cream, kefir, butter. Vitamin D, it also activates the vitamin D receptors, which help to regulate the expression of hundreds of genes. So many of our genes are regulated by vitamin D. Vitamin D helps to reduce inflammation and viral infections through its effects of cytokine production. Okay, now remember that COVID, what was killing people was the cytokine storm. I don't know if you remember hearing people talk about the cytokine storm, but the cytokine production happens when you get an infection, and when it's too much out of control, it can kill you. But vitamin D modulates that. Okay. So how interesting would it be that they strip our food of nutrients, tell us lies, tell us we don't need certain things, keep us covered up and out of the sun, because most people are at work or in their car. You need direct sun on your skin. You need to be outside during the hottest time of the day as well, like from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. when the sun is overhead and at its most intense, in order to even extract any type of vitamin D from the sun. But how convenient it is for them to let that happen and then sell people drugs. They're not telling people this. And this is very well researched and documented. Vitamin D also helps to reduce bacterial infections through the induction of certain defensins and certain chemicals and hormones and molecules. Vitamin D has effects on cellular differentiation, proliferation, and apoptosis. So vitamin A also has an effect on cellular differentiation. So that means how a cell knows that, okay, this cell is going to be like, I'm a lung cell, I'm a liver cell, I'm a brain cell. Vitamin D and vitamin A play a critical role in the cells knowing what kind of cell they are and what they're supposed to do. Cellular differentiation. Okay. Apoptosis is when cells basically commit suicide, like cancer cells and stuff like that. Commit suicide. Basically blow up, okay? Vitamin D also aids in implantation and maintains a normal pregnancy. So implantation, in case you don't know, is the beginning of pregnancy when the embryo implants into the uterus. Vitamin D plays a critical role in that. And it controls the secretion of multiple placental hormones, okay? So a lot of the hormones that the placenta is excreting is also controlled by vitamin D. Vitamin D is a master, modulator, okay? There are vitamin D receptors. There are vitamin D receptors all over our body, just like cannabinoid receptors, which, I'll do a video about that in the near future. But vitamin D and cannabinoid receptors are all over everything, okay? They both play such a critical role in modulating a lot of things in our body, okay? Almost every serious problem has some link to vitamin D. And almost every serious problem can be healed through cannabis. in some way. Not always smoking it, but also it could be using oils, tinctures, eating it. Somebody told me that I gave them knowledge of raw milk, and they love it. You're welcome. Yeah, I've been drinking raw milk since like 2004 or 5, and I have many clients who started to consume it, and I don't know a single person has had anything negative happen. I have known people who have revived their health and their children's health with raw milk, so it's a superfood. Vitamin D also limits the production of pro-inflammatory cytokines. So, that is so gross. I'm sorry. I was looking out my window, like there's a lot of cute bunny rabbits that hop around my neighborhood, and they're so cute. But just now, I saw this nasty rat, and like Chicago apparently has a rat problem, but it's like nowhere near as bad as New York. I don't see them anywhere near as much, but like I'm thinking I'm seeing a cute little bunny, and I'm looking at this nasty rat. Anyhow, enough of that. So, yeah, and I've already said that there's evidence that anemia in pregnancy is just as much linked to vitamin D deficiency as it is to iron. Vitamin D also stimulates red blood cell production, so that would make sense that it would have some role in anemia. Okay, vitamin D stimulates red blood cell production. And women with vitamin D levels less than 37.5 nanometers per liter were 4 times more likely to have a C-section. Okay. So I said I feel like you shouldn't be below 50. A lot of people are way below 50. So for pregnant women who are at 37.5, they were 4 times more likely to have a C-section. So, basically, vitamin A and vitamin D are very critical in general, pregnant or not, but definitely during pregnancy, okay? I'm going to be launching a Patreon page this weekend. I've been saying I was going to do it for the past year, but I've been so busy with stuff. But on that page, I will get more in depth on a lot of these topics. So I will be posting a Patreon page, launching it this weekend, and I will do a video where I explain more in depth about how to calculate and know if you're getting enough vitamin A and D, how to put certain foods together, how much you can expect in different foods. You can do the research on your own as well, but I'll be putting that together on my Patreon page. And there are some books that I think you should highly look at. I'm always giving people books and references. I meant to show some here, but I didn't bring them over here, but I will write them below. I'm doing this on my IG page. I will save this and repost it to my YouTube, The Body Scientist 81. So if you're on IG, you don't follow me on YouTube, be sure to follow me at The Body Scientist 81. And if you're on YouTube, you don't follow me on IG, be sure to follow me on IG at the_body_scientist. All right, people, if you found this video helpful, please like it, please share it. If you have any comments, anything that you want to share on this topic, please feel free. I'm always available for nutrition consultations with clients, and I hope you all are doing well. Have a great evening, and bye.